In an interview aired last night, President Biden shares his take on a wide range of issues, some of which are catching his own officials by surprise. Here's more on what he said.
With just 50 days left before the midterms, the president making news by suggesting he might, or might not, run again.
And it's much too early to make that kind of decision. My intention, as I said to begin with, is that I would run again. But it's just an intention. But is it a firm decision that I run again? That remains to be seen.
Speaking to 60 Minutes in an interview aired Sunday night, Biden, who's turning 80 in November, insisted he's in a focused mental state. But his uncertainty about 2024 marks a shift from what others at the White House have been saying.
The president has been very clear about this. He intends to run in 2024.
The president has been very clear that he intends to run again.
During the wide-ranging interview, Biden also says this about the COVID-19 pandemic.
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over.
Politico reports that administration sources told them the comment was not planned and caught Biden's own health officials by surprise. Lawmakers are also chiming in, reacting differently. Progressive Democrat Representative Attica Scott says Biden doesn't get to, quote, just declare a global pandemic over. While Republican Representative Jim Jordan questions, if the pandemic is over, why is Biden still using his emergency pandemic powers? On another front, the president again commits to defend Taiwan if China invades.
But would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion?
Yes.
China says it's already complained to the U.S. over Biden's remarks. Meanwhile, the White House, as it's done several times before, walked back Biden's remarks after the interview, insisting there's no change in policy.
It's been several months since the president has sat down for a TV interview. The 60 Minutes interview has created quite a buzz as the president was asked some pointed questions. To assess some of his responses, we sat down with Florida Congresswoman Kat Cammack. Congresswoman Kat Cammack, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
Congresswoman, President Biden made some news in his interview with 60 Minutes last night. When he was asked about whether or not he was going to run for president, he sort of deflected, but alluded to that he might. What's your takeaway?
Well, I think, historically, if you look at this time of year, presidents are always getting asked, regardless of the Republican or Democrat, are they running again? And the answer is always, well, of course, yes. The continuity for the party's message, for his administration, his agenda has to move forward. But I think there's been so much pressure around his mental health, his cognitive state, the failure to execute an agenda. And heck, you walk outside down the sidewalk and you can't help but trip over one of his crises that he himself has manufactured. So I know there's a lot of pressure for him not to run, but I think that he has to kind of bob and weave and duck around a little bit. I think for Republicans, it would be wonderful if he ran again.
One thing he did answer directly was when asked about whether or not the United States would back Taiwan militarily. He said that he would. He's been asked that question before, and each time he does answer it directly, but his administration backpedals. What should the U.S. policy be?
It's interesting because we have a long-standing commitment to Taiwan. And you look at our presence in the region, we have a long-standing commitment to the region. And when you talk to our commanders, you look at the precarious situation that we find ourselves in Taiwan, where nearly 90% of the world's semiconductors are manufactured, and of course 80% of the world's trade is running through the Taiwan Straits and throughout the region. This is not just a Taiwan versus China dynamic. This is a global security issue at this point. And so I think you look at the defense sales, you look at the work that we can do to support free trade and deepening our economic ties. there is a longstanding partnership that we have to maintain, and we have a responsibility to do so. And I think China would love nothing more than for the president to say that we won't stand with Taiwan, but we will.
The president was also asked about whether or not the pandemic was over, to which he said that it was. He commented on the fact that no masks were being worn in the facility they were at. What does the pandemic being over translate to you? And a follow-up to that, if indeed it is, should the mandates that the military and others are facing be removed at this point?
In the president's words of the pandemic is over, well, then he needs to relinquish his emergency powers immediately. That means that all of the mandates, all the requirements within the military and the federal service, they need to be pulled back immediately. And I think that there should be a retroactive reckoning for those that lost their jobs because they refused, rightfully so, to take the vaccine for personal reasons, health reasons, religious reasons. Also for those in the military that have been kicked out, who have served our country well and with distinction. They should be given an opportunity to come back into federal service. And then, of course, all the retroactive benefits need to be there as well. So if the pandemic is over, we need to actually act like it. And the federal government needs to get back to normal operating order. And I would love nothing more than to see the Capitol in fully functioning order as well. It's interesting. We've seen out of this administration this notion of it's do as I say, not do as I do. And when you look across the span of the speeches and the work that Biden has done, he's still wearing a mask. He is still operating the administration as though there is a pandemic with people working from home, people refusing to come back in. So he needs to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Congresswoman Kat Cammack, thank you.
Thank you.
Texas will continue sending illegal immigrants by bus to Democrat-run cities. The mayor of El Paso, a Democrat, defends busing the illegal immigrants in an interview with ABC News on Sunday.
We have about 50% of the people today that do not have a sponsor. They don't have money, so we're helping and working to get them to where they want to go. So that's been really important, that we don't send anyone where they don't want to go. We make sure we help them, and we put human beings and we put them on buses with food and make sure they get to their destination.
Texas says it's bused over 2,500 illegal immigrants to New York City since August 5th, while El Paso has sent over 1,100 since August 23rd. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick told Fox News last week, quote, "We're going to keep those buses coming until finally this administration wakes up." A report issued last month from the Federation for American Immigration Reform found that almost 5 million people have entered the United States illegally since President Biden took office. Virginia released new guidelines on transgender student policies last week. The new guidelines say that public schools cannot affirm a student's gender without parents' written requests. Also, bathrooms and locker rooms have to be used based on a student's sex at birth. Student sports have to be sex-based as well, unless federal laws require otherwise. The new guidelines will take effect after the state superintendent approves the final version. The previous guidelines, which were enacted under Democratic Governor Ralph Northam in March of 2021, define transgender as a student's self-identifying term. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.